off topic, but I can't resist because you're all such astute readers. What's exciting you now in American fiction? What are the books that you are really excited about, would recommend, works of fiction? We have so many readers in the room. It's your chance to tell them what book you really think they ought to run out and buy, should read, and that you're excited about. Do you mind doing that?
Not at all.
Okay, Lev.
I volunteered. Well, one of my particular enthusiasms is books that exist on the boundary between literary fiction and genre fiction. And there have been some books this year which were so exciting. I mean, I'm excited about Friends and Freedom, but that's not interesting to say, because everybody knows that. There's a book called How to Live Safely in a Science Fictional Universe by a guy named Charles Yu. This is a book, it is a wonderfully written, beautifully observed, funny, sad book about a time machine repairman. A guy who, people go back, he lives in a world where there are time machines, and people go back in their past and try to fix things that they screwed up when they were younger. Except it turns out you can't change your own past, so they get stuck there, so he has to go and retrieve them. It's just genius. And from the fantasy side, a woman named Catherine Valenti, Yu gets published as literary fiction. Cat, as she is known, tends to get published by genre presses, with those genre covers, which often look a bit cheesy. But she is like astounding talented. I think she's 30. Seems to write a book about a book a week. She's got a book coming out from Tor called Habitations of the Blessed, which is just. It's about Prester John, who was a legendary priest who went to these exotic countries and tried to convert people. He's a mythical figure, but she treats him as a serious historical subject. It's just astounding. I mean, what she does, just amazing.
Jane?
I'm excited about some new short story writers. Tiffany Yannick, who's published by Grey Wolf, has a book called How to Escape from a Leper Colony that I just adored. The voices, the structure, how it floats around and gives you a feeling of the islands, and she kind of puts together vignettes that build into something really kind of fascinating by the end. Robin Black had a new story collection come out this year. She's a newcomer, and I was very taken with her work. Jabari Asim, who wrote the book Why Obama Matters and The N-Word, wrote a short story collection set in St. Louis in the early 70s. It's really quite delightful. And I think also, Benjamin Percy, I read his first collection, Refresh. I reviewed it for the Los Angeles Times, and I thought, this guy is really something. He's doing something new. He was writing the first stories from the home front of the Iraq War, this kind of current home front. He's got an all out called The Wilding that is quite interesting. It's an expansion of one of those stories that he had in that collection. And on and on. I'm excited about some things coming up in the spring too that I'm reading and reviewing. The other, I actually did for the Daily Beast a collection of 5 story collections that I thought were really exciting earlier this year. Don Raffles' books too. Further Adventures in the Restless Universe is a very well crafted, intense bursts of stories across a theme of family and the demands on a woman's life. Very powerful.
Before I turn to you, Roxanne, I just want to do a little plug. Don Raffel is the new editor of our online magazine, which will debut in early December. And so I encourage you all to check our website, www.centerforfiction.org, to see the magazine, see the entirely new website, which will have lots of interesting things, including audio and video, and a section for writers and a section for book groups, and a wonderful online magazine featuring not only fiction from U.S. writers, but partnerships with lit mags from around the world, Australia, South Africa, etc., featuring stories by emerging writers there. So keep your eye out for that. And Roxanne, tell us about what you're excited about.
My favorite book this year was Jennifer Egan's book, A Visit from the Goon Squad, which I think is a really brilliant, beautifully written book. And what surprised me about it the most, it's really about time, and she wrote it because not because she read Proust, but reading Proust gave her, generated her interest in the way time passing operates within fiction. And so she did something which I had never read before, and I just find that book, it's one of those books that writers read and think, ah, I didn't know you could do this.
I agree.
And that's a great thing to happen as a writer. And so what she does is uses a kind of velocity which pulls you into these stories at sort of warp speed. She goes very fast anyway, and then all of a sudden, within a paragraph, she moves forward 20 years, and you're sort of saying, wait, I just was getting to know, oh, that's what, oh, and then you're back in the present, and she does this so deftly and so carefully, and she also does so that time itself is really the most powerful movement in this book. But she also does something which I found really interesting, because she writes in a way, she's so her language is so hip. It's so she sounds so contemporary, and she's so powerfully in the present that you think for a while that she's writing with an ironic voice. She's not. And that's one of the interesting things about this, because the voice sounds ironic. You sort of think for a while that this is one of those New York writers that keeps on the surface of everything, keeps you detached, keeps you away from the characters. But in fact, she's deeply engaged by the characters, and what she's doing is writing with this velocity which makes you feel distant, but in fact you become more and more engaged. So I think that what she's doing as a writer is astonishing, and for me it was by far the best book of the year.
Thanks. It's a great book. I agree. Jennifer was here last night doing a lecture on craft, in which she talked about developing characters, and it was pretty astonishing. And relating it to Proust is, I see a couple of people from the Proust group in the room, and it was very interesting to hear her talk about characters in time and how they evolve or don't evolve or change or morph, especially in relation to her interest in Proust.
I think idiosyncrasies are why we're asked to do the reviews. I think a book reviewer is supposed to have a point of view and a voice and a set of skills and informations and awarenesses. And when someone asks me to review a book, or I think I would like to review a book, it's because I think I have something to offer. And I'd like to put that on the page and offer it to people as what my suggestion is. I have to say I would be remiss not to mention to you all, given books that are coming up or thinking about. The National Book Critics Circle finalists will be announced on January 22nd of next year. We're all reading heavily right now. There will be 30 books in 6 categories, and between that point and the winner's announcement on March 10th of 2011, we're going to have book reviews of 30 books in 30 days on our blog, which is www.bookcritics.org. So you'll have an opportunity to almost have a speed read of 30 really wonderful books at that point. I have no idea what they are. We haven't made our decisions yet. We'll be deciding in January.
And you'll be able to come and hear the fiction finalists read here as well before they're announced.
March 8th. Put it on your calendar.
March 8th. Yeah.
I have to say, I think that the role of the critic is different from the role of the teacher. So that as a teacher, you are presenting books that you find very valuable. You try not to tell the students what they should think, but you reveal the book and say, this is what's powerful about it, this is why this is what the role it plays in the context of French literature or French history. And here's what we're going to talk about. What do you think about Madame Bovary? Do you find her engaging? What do we know of her character? How do we know it? So that instead of saying Madame Bovary is a superficial, trashy, Pop-Tart, were saying Flaubert was a very powerful, interesting writer, and here's where he fits in the history of French literature, and why do you think this is powerful? And let's talk about what he's doing.
Lev, you mentioned James Wood is someone that you trust and would go to. Are there other people that...
I always read Wood. I always read Sam Anderson at New York Magazine. And I read Ron Charles, who is wildly erratic as a critic, but always passionate and enthusiastic. But it's a short list. I'll admit it. It's a short list right now of places I go for reviews regularly. And then there's reviewers who move around, and I follow them from side to side.
I don't follow book sales very much, but there are a whole lot of literary blogs I read regularly in addition to literary websites. I mean, I'm following a lot of people who, like me, are on NPR.org because they started out, a lot of them, as literary bloggers. I follow The Literary Conversation, I follow The Millions, I follow Mark Athatakis down in Washington, D.C., and Maud Newton here, who's on hiatus writing fiction right now, and all of the really key newspaper websites that have gone online, because I can read them on the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post with Ron, the New York Times, and the Guardian, and I mean, just on and on. I have a whole list of things that just get sent to me every day. And I pick and choose. I like literary fiction and memoir primarily, but I'll read anything. But I read fast, and I love seeing the variety of voices.
Sales cloud is a real murky. It's a murky thing. Data about book sales. I mean, it's just stunning how little of it there is. That's quality. So I don't think anybody really knows. And publishers more and more woo bloggers to get attention for books. But it's like the thing about advertising. I know that 50% of the money I spend on advertising is wasted. I just don't know which 50%. It's really hard to get a good feel for who's powerful about spreading the word.
Roxanne?
I don't read literary blogs at all. And the only book reviews, I read the New York Review of Books, I read the New York Times, the Washington Post, and that's, I'll read James Wood about anything. He's wonderful. I sort of pick and praise, browse.
I've done it.
Really?
I've reviewed self-published. Well, I think there's only one that I reviewed. It was fantastic, and reading it, I thought, wow, how did mainstream publishing miss this book? I think that reading the novel finalists for the National Book Awards this year, Lord of Misrule, which is published by Macpherson, how did that book miss the mainstream publishers? It's just so strong. So what you become more and more aware of is that the publishing industry is not a great meritocracy. It rewards merit sometimes, but not reliably. So I pay more attention to self-published books now, just because I know there are great voices that fall by the wayside.